This little panel session that we're going to go through was really a brainchild of Jodie Ward, Beckmore Bell and Liz Allen, who've sat on our steering committee for today's Livestock Advisor update. Unfortunately, none of them were able to be here in person, but I did just really wanted to acknowledge them because this was very much their idea and their passion for you guys. And we wanted to have this panel session around reflecting what a career in an advisory capacity looks like. And so we've invited these three individuals to come forward. And for those who haven't had a chance to meet Desiree Jackson, Desiree hails from Longreach. We were calling her the Queen of Western Queensland last night. I've had a great opportunity myself to learn from Desiree in her time. She's been both an extension officer with the Queensland Department of Ag based out of Longreach for a long time. She's been a producer in her own right as well, and is now a consultant, specialising a great deal in animal nutrition. If you haven't had a chance to participate in one of Desiree's Nutrition Edge courses, I would highly recommend it. We get great reviews from those who participate. But I've got a couple of questions that I just thought to the panel that I might open with, and then I'll open to you guys in the room. Hopefully I can spark a few questions here, but this is really your chance to ask some experienced advisors around how you can build your career as an advisor yourself. But my opening question to the panel was, I found it quite interesting talking to a few people today that a number of people here don't feel like they're an advisor. They feel like it's someone a little bit more experienced and that it's someone else in their region who is actually that advisor. And that to me sounds a bit like imposter syndrome. And I know I personally suffer quite a bit from imposter syndrome, that I keep looking around for the adult in the room to step forward to answer the hard questions and then realise it's me. But I wanted to ask the panel, at what point have you left your imposter syndrome behind, or how do you tame it so that you can provide the best possible service to your clients? Who'd like to go first?
I'll kick off. So for me, it was, I guess in my first few years in the department, I was based in Kingaroy as an extension officer in soil conservation. And I didn't do a property visit by myself until I'd been in the department for probably 18 months. So I had really good on-job training. There was also more formalised training provided in that role. So I felt reasonably well equipped. Whether that was realistic or not, I don't know. That's for others to judge. But after a sort of 18 months, I was reasonably comfortable going onto a property to provide some advice or help a producer with something. And these are grain growers, these are not graziers. And I went from there. But I mean, if I came up against a problem that I couldn't nut out or was a bigger challenge than I could meet, I'd had a good fallback of experienced staff to come back to.
Can you hear me? Yep. So when I started off with the department, I initially did some work off and on at Swans Lagoon. So I got to work with some real gurus in the department who were then moved down to Brisbane and other areas, and I got mentored by them, and they were pretty tough bosses to work for, so it was a pretty high bar that I had to aspire to, and you weren't allowed any sort of a BS factor in providing advice to people, and I always looked at it from the point of view that if I'm giving advice to somebody and I had those people in the room, what would they say about the advice I was giving? But it's a bit like being on a spectrum. When I look back at what the sort of work that I did and what I did while I was with the department, way back when I started with the department, I think to myself, wow, there was just so much stuff I didn't know. And I jokingly actually say to people, when they get really nervous running workshops, even people who are experienced, they get nervous. I just try to give them some perspective, and I say to them jokingly, but not really jokingly, You only have to know more than the people you're actually running the workshop for, you know. And really, we can't be expected to have all the answers, and Catherine spoke about that this morning, so we can't be everything to everyone, and there's no shame in drawing on expertise from other people, and sometimes when I run training, I'll bring other people in to do sessions just to, fix up gaps where I think somebody else can provide better information. I think people value that. I think really what we're doing when we think that we have to be at really high level is we really have too much ego around how much we actually need to know, and we actually just need to drop our ego. At the end of the day, I think we're almost reading too much into it. Try to provide people with quality information and draw on help and find some really good mentors. For me, that was key, just having good mentors. I still used to ring Stu McLennan up about things, before he retired, and I had 30 years experience, but I still call on other people for assistance, and I think, just not having an ego about stuff, and I think as long as your clients can see that you're really trying your hardest and that you're really invested in giving them some help and advice, that's what they value the most. That saying people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care is so important. It sounds a bit fluffy, but it's just so true. They don't want to know how smart you are and how much information you have on your head. They just want to solve a problem, and it doesn't really matter to them how you solve that. And they know that everybody has to start somewhere. It's like the staff on stations. There's a lot of first years these days that come straight out of the city. Absolutely everything operates on the conscious plane, so they can't do anything automatically because nothing's automatic to them. And I often talk to station staff about that. Part of the reason is to cut a bit of slack for those who are learning, as long as they're trying, because they're starting from an absolute baseline in absolutely everything. And I think people accept that that's the case as well, as long as you've got the humility just to own up to that without being self-deprecating. And just get advice where you can get advice. So, establish really good networks of who you can actually call on for advice. But if you're going to do that as well, also show appreciation for where you're getting advice from, because sometimes I find, I do help a lot of people, but sometimes it does become a little bit too much where it's eating into a lot of your time. So, think about ways you can give back either to that person or give back to other people and do the same. And the reason, and Bob would be the same, the reason that, I know Bob's a really great mentor and he's helped so many new staff. He's a great mentor because he was also mentored as well. So, we like to give back to, and I'm sure Catherine's the same, we like to give back to industry. So there's no shame in not knowing stuff. I still say, this is what I want to do when I grow up, because I still don't think I'm there yet either. So if you think you're not there yet, I still feel the same way. We're all on a spectrum of growth, and some people are a bit further along in some areas, and some people are a bit further along in other areas. So think about what you're good at, focus it on what you're good at, and don't stress so much about the things you don't know. It'll come with time, but just make the effort to get some help then.
What about you, Catherine? Have you got a little imposter that pops up every now and then?
Oh, that mole needs to get right back in her box. I'll bloody swat that thing away. I don't think you ever get rid of it, to be honest, but I put mine in a little box. And how I do that is I recognise that being an advisor is actually not about me at all. It's about the difference that I can make to somebody else. And if I don't have the answers, putting your ego aside and asking for help. There's absolutely no shame in that. The other thing that helps me is to be curious and ask questions. It's a fail-safe. If you're not sure, to be an advisor, you need, as I said earlier, a base level of skills. But that doesn't make, you weren't put on the planet to answer everybody's questions all the time. That is impossible, and it's a stupid expectation to have on yourself. So be okay with that, roll with it, and find the help if you don't know it yourself.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that, you don't need to have all the information, definitely, but I think industry familiarisation is something that's important. And I haven't done it myself because I didn't have the opportunity when I was a sort of new recruit to the department, but I've made a point with a lot of the extension staff I've worked with, the younger extension staff, is pretty soon after they arrive, I line up 3 or 4 properties to visit, say 1 property per week, and because we've got fair travelling distance to some places, I'll say go out the night before, take a bottle of red wine with you, meet the family, get to know the family, talk to them about the family, the issues, the history of the place, and then spend all next day in the vehicle with one of the property owners or members on staff or whatever. Open the gates, ask questions, take photos. So by the end of the day, they've got a very good idea of how the industry operates at an individual enterprise level. And I've had very good feedback from newer extension staff to doing that, and they thoroughly enjoy it. Often it's a start of a fairly good friendship between that particular extension staff and the family they've spent sort of 30 hours with, so that's gold.
God, Bob, where were you when I started out doing that stuff? That would have been the best advice I could have had. Folks, who's got a question for these guys? Lee.
I got a comment.
Oh, a comment, not a question.
It's mostly been said today. Catherine said early this morning, get out and get some industry experience. I started out as a new graduate vet with a pastoral company and spent the first year in stock camp. And that's held me in pretty good stead for the rest of my career. I think it's been said by all 3 there, good mentors. Find yourself some good mentors. You don't have to know everything, but it helps if you know where to find most things. And the thing that I would add is network, because you may not know it yourself, but if you're well networked, you may well know someone who does know it.
Brilliant, Lee. Thanks for your contribution. Any questions from the group? All right, I've got another one then for the panel. What's an experience that you've had as a consultant that you felt like that experience made me? Now, it could be a spectacular fall on your face kind of moment, or maybe it was a really inspiring moment. But I'd be really interested just to hear a story from each of you of one moment that you went, actually, I can do this. I can be a consultant or an advisor. I saw you light up. You've obviously got a story.
Always got a story, Sal. So mine was when I very first started facilitating Myers-Briggs, and I was absolutely scared, really scared, because I had never done it before, and I had a room of 22 women, and anyway, so I actually managed to get through it, which was I was totally faking it. The authenticity paradox piece, how I spoke about being behaviourally like you've got this, I totally didn't have it, but my value set wanted to make a difference to these women. So I pushed through the fear and pretended that I knew what I was doing in order to run this workshop. Anyway, one of the girls in the dichotomy, she said to me, one of the dichotomies is, are you a thinking style person or are you a feeling style person? So are you a T for thinking, logic, or F, feeling, I make decisions based on a people-centred approach? And she said, I'm still a bit confused if I'm a T or an F. And I said, look, it doesn't really matter what you are. The reality is you need to be aware that they're different. I said, for example, I'm a T, but I really like to F a lot. So that was one of my most revealing and also embarrassing moments as an advisor.
Bob, over to you.
Yeah, I guess for me, I've got an example of a monumental failure and a fairly big success, and they were both in the same year. Once again, back in my early years in the department in Kingaroy as a soil conservation officer, we used to run around putting contour banks all over grain farms, and it's quite a rewarding job, because you can have a farm that's suffering from serious erosion one year, and with a good layout of well-built contour banks and waterways to take the excess runoff, you can really transform and make a huge difference to the amount of erosion that's occurring on that property. Well, one place was a very small dairy farm that had changed hands south of a little town called Blackbutt, and this fella had bought it. He was an experienced farmer, but this dairy farm was terribly run down. He wanted to grow grain, so he pulled out all the fences, all these little paddocks. The erosion that had occurred under that previous ownership, because they used to grow oats in this paddock and next year they'd grow them in the next paddock. But the erosion was horrendous, and over the years the sediment had deposited at the fences at the bottom of every paddock. So instead of having a nice even slope from the top of the farm to the bottom, it was like a series of terraces. It's very difficult to put a contour bank layout through that because the land has been so transformed by all this deposition or erosion and deposition. He spent bloody weeks ripping the fences out, cleaning it up, trying to knock those terraces down, which he couldn't do very well because he had a very small machine. I don't think there was a thing as small as a D3 Caterpillar, but that's what he had, a little D3, and it was probably 15 years old when he got it. I came out, I surveyed these contour banks on it, and he built them with this small machine, and I left. At the same time, I was working on another property back closer to Kingaroy, a bigger property, not as badly eroded, with good earth moving equipment, and he also built a very good contour bank layout. The fellow on the dairy farm had one of these freak storms where he got sort of 6 or 8 inches of rain in a sort of hour and a half or 2 hours, and the whole lot just fell to pieces. I'm telling you, the banks breached everywhere, the erosion was horrendous, and there's more sediment went off that farm in that one storm after I'd put all these contour banks all over it than had probably occurred in the previous 50 years. The other farm back near Kingaroy, it worked the way it was designed to work. But I felt really bad about that poor bugger in that block down at Black Button. I did go back once to see it, and he gave me a fair old tongue lashing, and I've never forgotten that. But I did have the success back near Kingaroy, so it was a bit of yin and yang. Yeah.
What about yourself, Desiree? Well, I guess it's an experience that you feel like that was the real making of me as a advisor or an extension officer at the time.
I can't really pick anything as enthralling as what Bob and Catherine just spoke about, because there were lots of little things. So there's nothing that particularly has stood out, but I think probably a couple situations that made me want to transition from working for government to working privately, and it's a big culture change for people to actually be paying for services, and certainly that's happening a lot more now, but once upon a time it wasn't. And when the Edge package came out, we actually ran the very first one in Longreach, and it was actually an in-house one for a pastoral company, and so we were charging commercial rate, and I absolutely was freaking out about that, because I thought, this is the sort of thing people used to pay maybe $50 to, and at the time I think we were charging them $1,500, and we were really stressed about it. And afterwards, it was fine, and we did get some good feedback, and so it's just taking that plunge, I think, into doing those sort of things. And I know even within the department, you guys do a lot of things where you probably undervalue yourselves a little bit and don't charge enough for your time, but not being frightened to put some value on your time. I think we're a bit hard on ourselves on our worth. Just there's lots of little things, but I don't think there's anything that hugely stood out. I think probably one of the more rewarding things more recently that happened over the years was actually the first PGS pilot that I did, and it was for a group in Augathel. And tomorrow when we do the training, I'll go through that in a little bit more detail, but it sort of grew wheels of its own, and I was sort of focusing on the feed-based area with the group, and it was in that nutritional area. And some of the goals that those property owners kicked in that PGS, they started doing some amazing things with improving their pastures and a whole lot of other areas that were sort of out of the scope of what that PGS was about, and they did that of their own accord, and they were actually critiquing each other. It was just they raised the bar so high for themselves, and went on to do a whole lot of exciting things. And I thought, if we hadn't had that PGS running, most probably they wouldn't have addressed a lot of those issues. So to me, that's really rewarding, seeing what goals people are kicking. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that, Desiree. Yeah, go for it.
The unfortunate thing in the ag is that we can have people that do not do any formal education, have a few school hard knocks, and then come out and call themselves a consultant or a thing. And yet, we have an industry. The Ag Institute has the certified practicing ag part. How can we make it so, especially from a value, like our experience as people that are scientifically trained, have the knowledge that we can actually get some of that recognition versus the person that's just, and it's no discredit to some consultants, but we often see the consultants who went broke themselves and then come out and tell other people how to do it. And yet we're competing on that same level because we're all viewed the same. So as ag advisors, what can we do in that space from the knowledge up there to sort of put that differentiation in there? There is a lot of market history in our industry.
That's a really good question. I guess the thing is there's a thing called recognition of prior learning, which might sound a bit like a buzz phrase, but it is real. And from time to time there are qualifications people can get, formal qualifications based on their prior learnings. One of the programs that ran at the University of Queensland for probably 10 years was a group called Rangelands Australia, headed up by Dr. John Taylor, ex-CSIRO. There's a few people in this room that were involved in Rangelands Australia. I was one of the mentors, for the want of a better term, of students who are in the bush. To get graduate status, so these are post-grad courses, these are not undergrad courses, but to get graduate recognition, producers on properties or existing consultants, people that have taken on some leadership roles in industry over several years, could get RPL up to a graduate level entry to start postgrad studies at the University of Queensland Gatton campus in rangeland management. You could do a postgraduate certificate, a postgraduate diploma, or a postgraduate or a master's degree in rangeland management. Unfortunately, John Taylor developed that program with a lot of help from a lot of people, but it was a brilliant program. It ran for about 10 years. A lot of people on properties did it. Some just did the grad certificate, but there's significant numbers that did the master's degree in range management. He had good enrolments and all remote area students. There weren't too many people in the big smoke or even in the major provincial towns. The University of Queensland indicated that the enrolments were too low, even though considering the population in the bush, they were quite good, and they eventually canned the program, and it was just the greatest tragedy that fell over. And that's the sort of thing I think would partly address sort of what you're getting at, Ross, I think. Yeah.
I think for... Hello. Oh, there we go. Found one that worked. I think for me, you've got a circle of influence and a circle of control. You can't control that people are going to be out spouting that they know stuff that they don't. And so the way that I would deal with that is maintain your own integrity. Make sure that when you're recommending a consultant to add value to what you're doing with a client, that they're qualified and that they're good at what they do. I think you'll drive yourself mad trying to control the uncontrollable. People are going to do their own thing. They have to live with that ultimately. You just want to hope and protect, hope that the clients that they're working with don't go to the wall, and that sooner or later they'll wake up and realise. But that would be my advice. Just there's nothing you can do about it. Focus on your own game, focus on your own integrity, your own skills, and ensure that the people you're bringing into the industry and the people that you're referring work to are suitably qualified. Does that answer your question, Ross?
Yeah, sort of. You can only control what you can control, but to me, it's like the worst thing about it is that if someone has a bad experience with a consultant, be it a nutritionist, be it a vet, you know what happens? That whole profession gets tarred for that bad experience. Yes. And so then the person that actually really needed that help, and now they're gun shy to go and seek advice again, because they got hit by a charlatan last time. Yeah. They're going to be less open to doing it. So I guess it's just one of those things that, as an industry, it's like, you go be a vet, you're going to do 5 years, and you come out with a doctorate, and you have to have a vet registration, you have to show that you've done all this stuff. To come out and be an ag advisor or to call yourself an agronomist,
Or a life coach.
Or a life coach, but like it's something
26-year-old life coach, no one's got more confidence than them.
But anything that's got a hiss behind it, like an agronomist or a nutritionist or any of these kind of things, you can just freaking call yourself that because you tell yourself enough, guess what, you end up being it. Yeah. You might not be any good at it, but you become it. And so that's the thing that I see, that there's, you're in the other industry, you can just call yourself it, even if you don't have the skill set behind it.
Yeah, it was one of my biggest frustrations. I was a qualified nutritionist. I studied 4 years of rural science and 12 months in the States doing ruminant nutrition. And people would call themselves a nutritionist and they were a sales rep for Ridley or something. And I'm like, oh man, they're trying to sell you something. But ultimately, it's going to happen. I mean, we can have conversations, we can use our networks, as to Lee's point, utilise your networks, but you have, it's frustrating. I'm hearing you. I don't know what to do about it except to protect your own brand and integrity and, without, short of running a marketing campaign, calling them all out publicly, saying don't deal with these twats. I don't know what to do.
It's not unique to this industry though. It happens every industry. Politics, production, it's a worldwide.
Kate, I think you've got a question.
I wasn't so much a question, more just a general comment on it. I guess similar, sort of tying a few of those things together. So like what Catherine said about what's within your control, are you trying to control the experiences of the landlord? They've had a bad experience, but that was their fault that they, not so much their fault, but you can't help that they had a bad experience, and it's up to them to do their research on who they're getting out onto their property. Okay, the vet or whoever it was that they had out, yes, they were fully qualified. It didn't work out, whatever it was. But essentially it comes back on the landholder to do their research as to who they're getting out, which I know that's not the answer they want. But.
Yeah, but I realise that, but it's the thing that there is this disparity in our industry.
Megan, you've got a comment or query or question?
Sorry, I'm not this, so I just want to make that clear. How did you avoid getting jaded and cynical when you are working with difficult people who don't want to change as an advisor? And I know it's probably less relevant when they're asking you to help. I'm sure at points you three had that experience, and I was curious to know what you did to continue with passion environments.
Leave them alone. You're not put on this planet to make everyone agree with you and everyone do what you want. People will live their own lives. Let it go. Let your ego, if they're not going to change, they're not going to listen to you, that's fine. Have a nice day. Take care. I'm going to go and do this.
But it's not, that's fine. It's not ego that drives you to want to change it. You can see that they actually are having a negative influence on their neighbours. I'm talking about land change or practice change or behaviour change or those sort of things, not about behaviour necessarily to you.
I've come across that on occasion, and sometimes what people say isn't actually what's actually bothering them, and I think it's about drilling down a bit deeper with them and asking questions if you can be bothered, unless you just want to walk away, and a lot of people choose to walk away. The nice thing about being private is you don't get as much of that as you do in the government domain, where things are free. But I think it's about drilling down, because there's something about their stuff, and that's just how they're projecting it onto you. It's got nothing to do, generally, even though on the surface it might be what they're sort of trying to convince you that that's what the issue is, but generally it's a lot deeper than that. And I think it's just drilling down, asking them questions, and eventually I've found without being aggressive with asking questions and sort of couching them in a way that's not going to come across as being aggressive, but again, just being curious and asking them. I find eventually sometimes they come around, they just need someone to listen to them. Sometimes it's almost like a cry for help, and some of those people, it's they're not going to respond to your questions, and then it's time to move on. But I think sometimes it can be a little bit deeper, and they just need somebody to listen to them. But others are just purely energy vampires, and just knowing when to walk away from them. Yep, and just, you know, telling them that you're just not going to waste any more time. And I've done that too, eventually. But I sort of believe in giving people a chance. Yeah, and just not taking, it's not about putting your ego aside. It's about not taking things personally. And I think that's what Catherine meant, just not taking it personally. Yeah, because they're probably like, you know, everyone probably finds her exactly the same way.
Bob, have you got something to add there?
Yeah, I guess for me, I mean, I suppose we, as humans, we take the line of least resistance often. And in any industry, doesn't matter if it's agriculture or health and medicine or whatever, we probably tend to try and take that line of least resistance. In an agriculture, so we're working with primary producers, I find there's more producers that are keen to make change and do things than there are that are real snags that don't want to do anything and make it difficult for other people. So I suppose I've been as guilty as anyone working with a former group and probably steering around the latter group. But sometimes you're in a position where you have to tackle the latter group, the ones that are the difficult customers. Once again, back to my early days in the department as a soil conservation officer, most people don't realise there's actually a Soil Conservation Act in Queensland. It's got some fairly significant powers. And we used to have to use that act. And that's a tough gig using legislation. I mean, we're primarily an extension role, but we also had this little regulatory bit. And it's a bit of a difficult one to tread when you've got those two hats you're swapping. But, you know, the Act was used in some instances, and same in a pastoral situation. I mean, for leasehold land, the Land Act is one of the oldest legislations in Queensland. The powers are quite extensive there. Government, for whatever reason, elects not to use it. You talk to individual graziers, say, and, you know, one-on-one, they say, God, that bloke's flogging that country. They should take his bloody lease off him. You get to a local branch meeting of AgForce in town, everyone's got the same view. No one will get up and say that in public. They'll all duck for cover. So it continues, and for a lot of them, the only way the problem is really resolved is when that property goes broke or they elect to sell and leave the industry. So I haven't got any pearls of wisdom, but that's probably reality.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so my part of extension I do quite a bit. I find I'm more comfortable in putting out things in written form, be more succinct in what I'm saying, and that part of what I'm grappling with going forward with our project that we're doing is we're really having to document practice change. We're having to ask the producers that tough question about, okay, share this information with you, all of that, you know, what practice change did you make, or, you know, and that's what the good practice change was about. You know, if something did work, that's great. If it didn't work, well, that's still great because you did use this tool we introduced you to. How do you take from if you see someone engaging, like using the analytics, seeing that they're really engaging with your content, you know they're clicking you, you see all that, but you just can't get them verbally, you know, like to get that conversation. What do you find is a good way to go from, sorry, yeah, I'm not going to see, this is why I write a lot of things, is going from the written form and seeing them taking that in and then, you know, maybe asking you a question, to then getting on to building that relationship past the written form.
It's a great question. Sorry. No, it's a great question.
I just feel a little bit unclear about your question. Sorry, Vicky.
So one of the things we're funded by Meat and Livestock Australia, and they're shifting the bar for us, you know, to really, they're wanting to see social, economic and environmental impact from our program going forward. We have to document that, and as a climate mate, that's part of, as the interaction is showing that, and we're really honing in now, moving away from the workshop space as we move into NACP3 to really one-on-one producer focus or one-on-one industry focus, to then really drilling down and then, you know, documenting and putting in narratives, really going down that approach. And MLA really want that because they want to put economic value to it. it's a pretty tough gig. How you get the emotional benefit, the economical benefit, because some producers don't want to share with you that, you know, they actually are carrying, say, you know, 1,000 head of stock when, you know, they should only be carrying 800 head or whatnot. You know, it's actually sort of drilling down to get the real information out of them that you actually need for your role, when you know that you don't want to push the relationship too much, because you know they are taking it in. They're slowly getting it there, and sometimes I find as efficient to leave KPIs back a little bit and just keep working on the relationship. That's how I feel.
So the first question I'd be saying, from their point of view, what's in it for them? And if you can see that there's something in it for them, or even ask them, then you're going to be a little bit more on the front foot than asking for that information, because you know it's, you know, at the moment you can't see anything like beyond almost sort of just, you know, getting their information, not actually providing anything in return. So, you know, how's it going to benefit the producers? So have a think about what, from your point of view, what, you know, what's in it for them. And then maybe even speaking to some of them and saying, well, you know, that you do understand that some of that information can be sensitive, but what would be some of the benefits from their point of view if they were able to share that? But also, I think sometimes when you collect data, you also worry about where that finishes up. And probably one of the things you're struggling with, I'm thinking, would be that you're worried you might also break their trust as well, because they're going to be judged. So I think doing a little bit more groundwork and making sure that, you know, maybe some of that information stays anonymous, and giving them those reassurances. But also, do you know what's going to happen to that data, aside from the fact that you're sending it upwards? You know, what's the value in actually sharing that data from your point of view? You know, what's the usefulness of actually sharing that data aside from collecting that data? So, you know, how's it going to be used? How far widely is it going to be disseminated? Are they going to maintain anonymity and be guarantee no repercussions or judgments? And what's in it for them? And figure that out for yourself, but also ask, you know, some of the producers that are actually involved in that program.
I think Desiree said it really well. We've actually got a very similar situation with one of the projects that we're running. So we run a project called the Coolsource Initiative, and we've got 45 farmers that are giving us all of their operational data in their cropping sector. So their paddock data, their inputs, their costs, how many times they've been across the country. And we've had 3 farmers that just will not put in their data, and they've stopped answering the phone. So what we've had to do with those people is explain the why. Like, why is this project important? And to Desiree's point, like, what's in it for them? And then Jane's actually driven out to sit down with them and explain it, answer any questions. The data piece was huge. They were really concerned about what we were going to do with their data, where we're going to sell it to Kellogg, who's a partner in the project. And when we were able to waylay all of that, they've all come on board, but it just took time to build the relationship. So, yeah, I think Desiree said it really well.
Can I go the opposite direction? And if you want to find out what's going on in a town, say Townsville, a good source, talk to a taxi driver. I mean, they don't know anyone in particular, but they've met a lot of people. And it's quite astounding how people open up to a stranger. And I think to a certain degree, we can take that same method with, say, assessing the value of an extension program. So, for example, there's a lot of money spent in the Upper Burdekin on improving land management for reef water quality reasons. A lot of work done by NQ Tropics, DAF staff, consultants, etc. So we're very familiar with those individual property owners, and in some cases quite good friends with them. And when it comes to valuation, you often wonder, geez, am I really getting the full story? But if you can get someone goes in there that doesn't know them, and what we've done in this instance is use someone like Jerry Roberts, who's a consultant in Longreach. Desiree knows him really well. He's ex-DAF or ex-DPI. Jerry doesn't know these people. They don't know him. He's an excellent extension officer. He's got excellent people skills. He comes in, he surveys them. He rings them up first. We give him all the names. He rings them up. and he'll arrange a date. We can either even just do it over the phone or come and do it face to face. All the data is anonymous. If he identifies a property that could potentially make a good case study, he'll actually broach it with them and say, look, would you be interested in documenting what you're doing here as a case study that could be used? Now, clearly then it's not anonymous anymore, but at least it's their call. But to get a stranger from outside and do that, I think often enlists more of an honest opinion or result on what's actually happening on the ground. So don't feel compelled as an extension officer that you've got to do all the evaluation yourself.
Yeah, question up the back.
Hey, how you going? Melissa Kirk, Southern Bell, Mount Isa. I've got a question for you. I'm a project manager there, and I've got some, brand new project leaders that have just come out, very eager and whatever else. And obviously coming to something like this where there's so much experience and knowledge in the room, it can be extremely daunting with a feeling of inadequacy when you walk back or fly back to Mount Isa. When you guys started off and you were in the same boat, what was some of the best advice you got, or what would you give someone in that situation who's just entering the world of travel and going from there?
Probably a list as long as my arm. Three things. So I think staying humble and listening, listening to producers, but listening to and hanging out with the experienced staff are probably the three most important things, but actually getting out there and doing things as well. So, Bob suggested earlier about going out, a little bit earlier to properties, and just having that chat and driving around, and you get judged on whether you know which direction to swing that gate when you open it, and you don't want to get that one wrong for a start ever. Yeah, little things like that, I think. Yeah, those would probably be the three most important things I can think of.
I guess for me, it's I mentioned that industry familiarisation, gain an understanding of the industry in your district, but more importantly, it's also gaining an appreciation of people on properties in agriculture. They don't manage a whole series of components. They don't manage the pasture bit and the cattle bit and the people bit and the marketing bit and the financial bit. They manage an integrated business. And we really need to get an appreciation that is the case, because often, and I think young staff probably fall into this trap a little bit, I certainly did when I started out, you go out with me with a strong NRM background and that's the beginning and the end of my world. And I expect it to be the beginning and the end of their world, but clearly it's not. So just be aware that you're talking about one component, but it's so important that you see where your component fits into their overall business, their overall enterprise, because that's what they manage. They're managing a business. They're not managing 10 bits.
Great question. My advice would be take your time. You don't have 20 years of experience, so take your time acknowledging that you're going to get there. Don't put pressure on yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. Like when you're starting out your career, how can you? So take that pressure off yourself, which is hard for someone who's driven and really wanting to make change and make a difference. And my third piece of advice would be find a mentor, or better still, find 5. And a mentor in the true definition has your best interests at heart. So they will ask you challenging questions. They will push back, but they have your best interests at heart. And to find good mentors early in your career, I still use my mentors all the time. Some of them I send mad, but that would be my 3 pieces of advice. So take your time, don't put pressure on yourself, and find a mentor.
Any other questions from the floor? How are we going for time, Gilly? Have we got time for another question? Or all right. So just picking up a little bit on your question, I want to put one back to the team. So taking yourselves back to when you were that eager, excited, probably 22 to 24-year-old, heading out to go start your career as an advisor. Yeah, 5 years ago. With what you know now, what would you do differently looking back? What would you tell yourself to do?
I'll talk about one thing I would have done differently, I would have done a lot more work on myself initially, because I can say that, you know, most of the success that we have in working with people is the stories that are going on in our head all the time. And so we need to get that sorted out first before we can actually deal with our clients as well. So we got a lot of stuff that's happening in our heads, and we need to be able to deal with that. So doing some personal development, there's so much good good information and training out there. Now, Tammy's even got a program on personal development, so a little plug for you, Tammy. But there's so much out there, and I'm still on that personal development journey, and what I learn, and people think of it as being, you know, airy-fairy stuff. It's not science, but it's sort of key to everything, and it's key to understanding your clients, but also yourselves, because generally we get in our own way of doing good stuff, and that's because of, you know, what's going on in our heads. And you know, the more time you can invest in yourselves, the more of what you can learn, you can apply to your clients as well, because you're not just dealing with one person, you're dealing with, you know, 20 different personality types at a workshop. And you know, if we want to make progress with adoption, that's how we do it. And that's probably been one of the biggest failings. We've got so much good science out there. There's so much good extension work that goes on out there, and training and so on. But the missing link is actually being able to understand our clients, what's going on inside here. You don't know what sort of a day they've had, or a week they've had, or a year they've had before they come in to actually do training or dealing with them. And we wonder why, you know, why aren't they adopting these things? Because we don't know what's going on in their life and in their heads. But we also get in our own way, so we need to also sort out ourselves as well. So that's probably something I would have done a lot sooner. And when I see a lot of people in their 20s going to the same training I did, I think to myself, geez, I wish I would have done this, you know, when I was a lot younger.
I guess for me, it's a couple of things. Is to, in your role as an extension officer, try as much as you can to extend principles. Avoid extending recipes, because recipes are too cast in concrete. Principles are things that people have got some leeway to take and adapt to their situation. The other thing that I've done, probably not as much as I should have, but I've tried to do it. If you get a new landholder comes into the district, so they might be an experienced landholder from another region or another district, but they've come into your district, often there's a chance they bought a property that's in pretty poor condition. It's run down. It could be quite degraded. Those people are in a very receptive position to actually make some monumental changes to that property. And if you can meet them and you know, just say, well, you know, the department's here. We've got people that cover these fields. We're keen to work with you on whatever you plan to do on the property. 9 times out of 10 they'll come back to you, and you can get some really good changes on properties that have been badly degraded, and they'll start to pull those places up by their bootstraps. So just keep an eye on the property market that's going on in your district, and when places do change hands and someone comes in, at least go and introduce yourself to them. Drop in, ring them up and say, look, I'm passing through your district this afternoon, can I drop in? And you know, usually they say, yeah, please do.
I think from me, what I wish I knew as a younger consultant was that I could ask for help. I think growing up as the oldest of 4 kids and having no dad, I didn't know that there was an option that you could ask for help. And I think I did the Australian Rural Leadership Program, and I was up in the Kimberley, and I was carrying far too much gear for everybody else, and I fell flat on my face, and I was pinned by my backpack like a little turtle. And one of the guys didn't help me up straight away. He just looked at me and he said, have you ever asked for help in your life? And I was 29 years old, and the answer was no. I had never, because it didn't occur to me that I could ask for help. So I think if I had my time again, I would like to tell my younger self that it is okay to be vulnerable, to not know everything, and to actually ask for help. I think particularly asking people that are more experienced than you, they're delighted to be of assistance, and I think that's a beautiful thing to take advantage of.
Folks, if I could ask you to please thank our panel. I think that's been an excellent note to close on. If you're looking for some potential mentors, there's plenty in this room, including yourself. So, really encourage you as we wrap up the day to come and have a chat and potentially find yourself a new mentor. Thank you. Over to you, Keely.
Oh, a long walk across. Thanks. I just wanted to quickly take 5 or 10 minutes just to wrap up today. And while I'm doing it, if you could please answer the impact questions that are on poll everywhere. As Vicky said, this is some of the information that we as MLA require us to actually collect. And what it does is it means that we're able to better look at the way that we're investing levies and the way that we are training all of you, but also all of our producers. So I just wanted to quickly thank the working group. So as mentioned, Liz Allen, Jodie Ward and Beck Moore-Bell couldn't be here today for a variety of reasons. But they have been very instrumental in pulling this program together, and a lot of it has been their brainchild. I'd also really love to thank Jo Jones and Leanne Sheriff from Pinion. We have Jo here, she's an absolute legend. And please thank her for all of her work today while having a glass of Chardonnay. And I want to thank all of you for being here and making such a fantastic day. We heard about MLA's investments and some of the challenges we're facing in this industry from Mick Crowley today. We had Catherine Marriott provide us a really wonderful insight into how we can flex our behaviour to get the most out of our relationships. We heard about the Climate program and how producers Jo and Anita have flipped their business in response to climate challenges. Jeff Neath reminded us that death can actually be fatal and the importance of vaccination and pain mitigation programs. We had a really great panel on the CN30 pros and cons of the emission schemes. We heard from Bob Shepherd as he reminded us that it doesn't matter what your grazing system is if you haven't got the basics right. And we walked through the Australian Biosecurity Plan with Dr. Beth Cookson and Rachel O'Brien before getting some really great insight on a career and advisory from Catherine, Bob and Desiree. So it's been a really fantastic day full of a lot of information, and I'm really grateful you could all be here with us. I just wanted to end on a note that MLA really values our livestock consultants, and we do understand the great impact and influence that you have over our levy payers and our producers. And on that note, I want to say that we want to work with you more. So we're looking for different opportunities that we can join together, that we can invest in your futures, and also that we can work with you and your clients to better the profitability and productivity of their enterprises. So please come and speak to us. Myself, Sally, Julia may not be here anymore, and Elizabeth are here, and we would love to talk to you about any adoption programs that you might like to be part of, or just anything else you have to ask about MLA. We also have some resources up the back. Please take whatever you like. Please take some if you'd like to give them to your clients. We have a lot of resources there that were created through the NB2 program, as well as some information on Lucana and a few other little things there, which is excellent. And if you are coming to the PGS day tomorrow, it will be here. If you haven't signed up but you would like to sign up, please come and see me. And also drinks will be in here and also just outside, and we will also have canapes. So please stick around and network and talk to us about the rest of the day. Thank you so much.